After a week of not feeling so hot, I think Michigan fans are back and looking forward to an exciting week. Why not? A game on tap up at E.Lansing against Michigan State. Michigan coming away with a bounce back victory over Washington. So you're back. What's happening? Thanks for joining us here on a Monday, a place where you can go and be sure that there's going to be the latest in Michigan football and basketball talk. And that is what we guarantee today. We, after you look at you're like a coach or whatever, you've looked at the film, you've read everything, you've watched everything, your thoughts after Saturday's victory over Washington at the Big House. You had a double session Monday morning down in Ann Arbor. Sharon Moore talking with the media. Same thing with Dusty May, whose team, what'd they do? Had the curtain go up on the season, exhibition style against Cincy. And then May talked about what he saw on the film this morning. I was at both of those two presentations. I'll tell you my takeaway. But the big story is that Michigan is back in action and headed up to E.Lansing for a Saturday night tilt against MSU. Now, MSU on paper, they don't really look like much. They're 3-4. Michigan is a 14.5 point favorite. And, MSU 2 weeks ago, when they got beat by UCLA, it was get rid of Jonathan Smith. And then a lot of people looked at it and said, yeah, but, you owe Jonathan Smith just in the second year. You might owe him $40 million or whatever it is, 39. And, you paid Tuck 95. I know it wasn't your money, but hey, 95, 40 million, you've got to bring in another coach, maybe. And then losing to Indiana, not in an embarrassing fashion as they did at home to UCLA. They fought against the Hoosiers, but still got rolled pretty good. Just kind of extending for a week, I would think, about the fans jumping back on the let's get rid of Jonathan Smith bandwagon, especially if things go sideways this Saturday night. Last year, you get a sense that Michigan State, they understood, the Tucker embarrassment and that Jonathan Smith, you're going to give anybody a chance and see what he can do and everything else. But it wasn't very inspiring. And then the Michigan game was kind of ho-hum for MSU as they lost. And then he, was given the, well, I kind of know what it means now type talk. And if his team doesn't come, it's just from the Michigan State side. If they're not playing, I don't know what you'd say, balls out, fighting every single inch, and then, you can lose a ball game and still fight real hard, and, the fans will still be upset, but at least you did that. They get beat up pretty good. And what else does MSU? I mean, MSU didn't have anything else to look forward to football-wise. No other games. I mean, this is it. And this was a little bit like, last year for Sharon Moore. Michigan didn't have, they needed to get bowl eligible. They did with their win against Ohio State. And then they shocked the world and things felt a lot better. That would be what, if you were on the MSU side, you'd say what they were looking for, but you're not on the MSU side. No Michigan fans thought Michigan was going to beat Ohio State last year either. So I'm still, kind of the same situation. I mean, Sharon Moore is in his first year and Smith now is in his second year, but that's it. They've got Marsh. He's a tremendous wide receiver. So Michigan will have to, every team's going to have something. Michigan State's got Marsh, and then they do have Childs, but I don't know. They had the Italian that they put in there and maybe you see both. Childs a little bit banged up. Childs is a tremendous athlete, and he looks good when he throws the ball. Just turns it over too much. We've watched him for a couple of years, and I think everyone said the same thing or says the same thing. It's like, wow, he'll beat somebody. He's dangerous once he gets, but he really hasn't. You haven't seen that breakthrough, and he's kind of been the same player. So that's what I see for MSU in this game that is on tap coming up on Saturday night. Robbie's expecting Michigan to win by a couple scores. And, I think that's about right. I think Michigan should win this game going away. And things have changed. And that's where you get when we go to the game against and what happened this past Saturday. And look, Sharon Moore in Michigan had a bad week. There was all kinds of things. I've said this before. If you take a team that's got lofty expectations, in Michigan pretty much every year, if not every year, they have very lofty expectations. But you take any team that's like that, like Michigan, and you have some bad losses, what I will enter and what I will suggest to you is that you are going to have fractures in the team. You're going to have people yelling at each other. The boat is going to rock, whether the stories spill out or not. They're going to be there. And so last week, there was some stuff going on where you had a former quarterback from last year saying that, there's finger pointing going on. And then you had Rod Moore getting, Twitter fingers out, going back at Tuttle. And really, we only see is really you only scratch the surface. You can't handle it. You really couldn't handle what is said between the players during a week after a loss and then two losses. And when the things go down, the Michigan fans wouldn't be able to handle it. They could have barely handled what was happening last week. But now things seem to be, the ship has been righted, and and all of those rocky seas and how bad the program was on the verge of cratering and imploding, and the rough season now it's just like, it seems like it's smooth sailing. And even that, you have to admit yourself, you were looking there at the half and it was 7-7. And you had to think, wow, if Michigan loses this game. I was thinking that. Michigan, if they lost that Washington game, that it was going to be a rough second half, that people weren't going, there wasn't going to be a lot of people accepting the three losses this early if it happened. I didn't. And so, the things that the place where they're at now is that you look at the schedule and you say, wow, they can really beat Michigan State. Again, they beat, you start looking at Purdue and North. They should win all of these games. I know people are like, watch out for Maryland. Sure. It's on the road. Maryland's got a rookie quarterback. I know they just lost at the buzzer, but so maybe people aren't as worried about the Terps as they were last week. People seem to be really worried about Maryland last week, but it looks doable. You got to say that it looks doable now of winning their next four games and rolling into a home matchup against an Ohio State team that I would expect to be number one, undefeated, and the number one team in the country. But you know what will happen with fans that week? I think most people are thinking that Michigan will have a chance to win that game, that they know that Michigan is in Ohio State's head. They won the game last year. Then they have a quarterback. I'll fast forward right now and tell you that the majority of fans will, even if Ohio State's won and they smashed everybody, that's not good. Even if they, kill everyone, probably not the best word either, beat everyone, heading into that final game, I still think the majority of Michigan fans will feel like Michigan will have a good chance and will win that game. So big win when it came down to it against Washington. I thought that there was, I didn't think about making any jokes myself. Maybe I need to freshen up my humor bone or whatever else. But when Sharon wore the going to work jacket last week, however he said it, we lost. and we're getting back to work. Well, he wore the jacket again today, and there were some reporters that joked with him, like, "Oh, did you see the memes, about everyone making fun of you of wearing your jacket?" I saw a short video of a couple guys making fun. I guess they were making fun. They were basically like, "That's Harbaugh's thing. You got to be your own guy. Stop trying to be Harbaugh. You're not going to work." And then there were, as you might expect on Twitter, a bunch of rivals, saying some things. But I took some of the photos. Actually, looking back, because I didn't notice it over the week, it wouldn't have surprised me. But then I looked today and I thought, they were kind of funny. Actually, you had Sharon Moore, for those that are listening on the podcast, and I really appreciate all of you that listen to the podcast. And you can find any of our podcasts on Amazing Blue Review, where you find your favorite podcast. But you got Sharon Moore in a construction worker's outfit with the orange vest and the yellow hat, and he's saying that we got to build this thing brick by brick. So what if he had gone up there with his construction uniform? He went up there with his jacket, saying that they had to get back to work. And then the one next to him in the construction worker, they have him dressed up. This is my favorite one, actually. I don't know if it says an admiral, as an old admiral, like back in the the Christopher Columbus days. You've got the telescope that you look through here. He's got the hat, the whole thing. And as the head coach, it's my job to steer the ship. He could have come up with, which I thought were, I think both of those were funny. I got two more. One, Sharon Moore in a fireman's outfit. If Sharon Moore, if it didn't work out as a football player, as a football coach, and he went into another line of business or another job, he looks good in a fireman's uniform. I'm just going to have to say that. And he said, he reminds the team that we face the fire, we don't run from it. I thought it was, pretty clever, pretty good. And then I don't know, this one I think was meant to be, funny towards Sharon Moore, but actually this could have been Michigan putting this one out. He is dressed up in a chef's uniform with a big high hat, chef's hat, or whatever you call those things. He says, "That's why I'm wearing the chef's whites, to remind the team and the fans to just keep calm and let me cook." So there you go. And a bit of fun with Sharon Moore, who laughed at that today when he was asked if he had seen the memes of himself, and he said no. I thought some people were going to pull it up on the computer or their phones, but they did not. Aaron is talking about 63 axe handles. Paul Bunyan is 63 axe handles high with his feet on the ground and his head in the sky. Paul Bunyan. There used to be a restaurant in Ann Arbor on Jackson and Zebe Road. It was before my time, but people would say it was a gigantic Paul Bunyan that was there. Back in the day, they had the Paul Bunyan trophy. And I can remember seeing it in the recruiting room, and there it was. And then I don't know who did it first. I think it was Michigan State, but I'm not sure. That they started putting their helmet on them and then, dressing them up in Spartan gear when they won. And then Michigan, they do that now. It looks pretty cool when he's wearing a Michigan helmet. It's a great. It's not like I don't know. You say attractive trophy. What's an attractive trophy? It's a cool trophy when you win it. It's cool to get a picture with Paul Bunyan. It's got a big base, and it's so that it would be fun to have the picture with Bunyan. You want to win that trophy. No, you got to. Michigan has to. There's no other way around that. They can't. You want to get people upset lose a game. You want to get them furious and ready to oust everyone, no matter what's going. Lose to Michigan State, you can get everybody fired up real quick if that happens. Brian says the Washington game reminded me of 22, close at the half, roll in the second half. Well, you'd have to correct me. They played Washington in 21, and they were up 10-0 at the half. So did they play them again after that? I don't think so. So you meant 21, and it was 10-0. This one, of course, was much closer. Sitting there, where was he talking about? 10-7 at the half, 7-7. So I could see why you could say it could remind you. To me, Saturday's game, Michigan did some nice things in the first half. It was one of those things, and in sports, I mean, you got to finish them off. You've got to get the ball into the end zone. You've got to do all those things. And while they were moving the ball, it wasn't, it wasn't all that great. They weren't able to finish drives. There were a lot of missed opportunities. They were stubbing their toe on these fourth downs. Haven't been able to figure that out. Sharon today did say that they were going to go for it, or that he was trying to challenge it on the Bryce Underwood one, and then he couldn't get a challenge. He could have burned the timeout. He did not there. The other one that was down to the 5, that's when I thought, for however long it took between not being able to get the first down there on the 5-yard line to whenever Cole Sullivan, that amount of time, whatever the real time was elapsing, I thought, this is not good. Michigan is, they continue to do things, but this is too close. And then, of course, it all sprung loose when you had Sullivan, and it happened fast because Marshall on the very next play took it in for the touchdown. Then it wasn't long where you had Rolder coming in and making the interception, and then Michigan was off and rolling there. If all week long, if we knew, people always, it's natural. You want to know, who's in, who's out, who's banged up, and they've got these injury reports that they kind of put together that they don't get fined. I would say they don't have to put everybody's name on there. Sharon Moore says if a guy practices during the week and they're banged up, well, then they'll put them on the injury report. And yet there were 3 guys that, he said Rod Moore had practiced, but then he was a game time decision, all these things. But if you knew that Rod Moore was doubtful, that Hillman was doubtful, that Hogan Hansen, and then Marlon Klein was going to be out, they were down to their 3rd and 4th string tight ends. They were down to their backup running back. And of course, Link got hurt. Was that second series of the game? And so they had Frazier in. They relied on a lot of their depth. And we were just talking about depth last week and how teams, they don't really have any depth because if a guy isn't in the 2 deep, he bolts to go play somewhere else. Michigan needed their depth and they relied on it, and it came up huge for them. And nobody was sitting around saying that they had Deacon Tonelli and Zach Marshall on their bingo cards. Zach Marshall having a game high in terms of yardage, and then Tonelli coming up with big catches. Tonelli coming up with the biggest catch, even though it might not have been intended for him. I'd have to go back and look, but it was the biggest play for Michigan in the entire game. And now you're talking about a 3rd or 4th string guy coming up big there. So that was huge. And then the week before, heading into the season, the analysis is that Michigan has a very deep linebacking core, and that's the position group that will lead them certainly on defense. And then Saturday night, folks that watched the film, and then we watched the film on Monday with Scar, and those linebackers, Scar likes to say, they put them in conflict. They were looking this way, going that way. They were just, didn't have a good game. Nobody really had a good game out in California, but the linebackers seemed to be on a string that they couldn't get it done. And Lincoln Riley was, toying around with Wink and everything else, but the linebackers came up huge. Position group of the day, with the 2 interceptions that feel like they were the 2 biggest plays of the game. There'd be some other plays that you could put in there for plays of the game, but you wouldn't go very far before Sullivan's was the biggest on defense. I talked about that Tonelli, but then the roller pick was pretty big as well. That's where I'm sitting, from this game and, taking a look at it, and they overcome a sloppy first half and, they're able to get the victory, and here we go. They're back in the top 25. If they win these games, an opportunity to play Ohio State to get into the playoff, which, doesn't sound a week ago sounded hilarious maybe to people saying it, like no way. But now you're like, maybe. Are you going to have to, are you taking a wait and see? Michigan should beat Michigan State. Michigan should beat Purdue. Game is at home. At Northwestern, at Maryland. Northwestern at Wrigley Field. I'd like to go to that game. At Maryland, they should win those games. Michigan should win their next 4. That's it. That's where I'm at. I think that's where you're at. Now, if you have any feedback, any questions, now's the time to go ahead and say something. DVR's not worried about what people are saying. He's talking about just win. John's in beat MSU mode. That's not a bad mode to be in. Your Robbie is talking about the tight ends, and it's finally good to see them getting involved in the passing game against Washington. Always good when Bryce has more options. Bryce was good. And on Saturday. And now he's playing like somewhat that it's playing out somewhat how I thought it would. He played way better early than I was expecting him to. And then obviously he did not play well, I'll say at all, in either of the 2 losses. But he came back and he had his best game. He's looking good. He's, that's the one thing that even if he wasn't, regarded as the greatest ever and all these things, you could just see that he just seems like he's getting better and better every time he plays. Brian was talking about 22 in general. I got you there. All right. The new life. Michigan needs to maintain a professional attitude against Sparty. This is MSU's bowl game. It's more than that. If they win, this is Michigan State's season. Their fans, this would be, there's been nothing to look forward to. They've been happy about nothing. If they would win Saturday, it would make the season for them. So you're right about that. And then on Michigan side, Sharon Moore, you go through all of it. I was trying to see if I could get the exact quote from him. Maybe I can. But he was talking about the rivalry and everything else. But then he was asked about, well, what about before the game? What about after the game? What about the tunnel and everything else? He's reminding the guys, and this is where you talk about maintaining your professional attitude, that none of that stuff at the end, out, so the pushing and shoving with Colston Loveland, the guy firing into him, afterward, calling him little brother. Those are the things that grab the headlines. Sharon was talking about his first experience with the Michigan State rivalry. It was back, I believe he said 2018. That was the Devin Bush before the game, tearing up he didn't actually go out there. How did he do it? He was out there warming up, and then MSU came out there and was like, we're supposed to be out here. And he's like, I'm warming up. Then they all marched together with their hands. And that's some rivalry stuff. The tunnel. completely ridiculous. They tunnel, getting, the players are, starting a fight in the tunnel and everything. That was crazy. Everybody, turning it, depending, if you're Michigan or Michigan State fan, it was you. None of that. I don't, you might want it all as a Michigan fan. You might want an ass kicking, which I completely understand, but you also might want some of that. You might want somebody after the game to grab the mic and, call somebody little brother, or just in the post game. And that would be, just very satisfying to a lot of people. But I would say, yeah, maintain a professional attitude and win the game. You can say, hey, what about the fun part? And I could say, I understand what you're saying. You want to have fun. Michigan fans want to have fun too. It's not just girls. LJ, love the tight end play. Likes the options for Bryce. Also good to see Jordan Marshall running hard on the East Landfill. I've never mind that nickname for East Lansing. Yeah, I would say you do have to give it up for Jordan Marshall. Jordan Marshall, when you listen to him, and so he had the big 100-yard game of the bowl game last year. He was, he was awesome in the bowl game. And then you listen to him after the bowl game, and you listen to him in the offseason. Most of the players are like this, but then there's some, usually about a handful a year, that when you hear him, you say, man, this guy's so Michigan. This is Michigan. Blake Corum was like that. There's a lot of them. You sit here for an hour talking about that guy's a Michigan man. Oh, that's everything that you want. When somebody goes to Michigan, you're like, Marshall's that kind of guy. Everything that he says, great teammate. Praises up and down the coaching staff, his team, the effort that he's going to give. You listen to him after a game, you just like, it's hard not to like Jordan Marshall. And what I didn't know is that Justice Haynes was going to have this incredible burst that you see that with guys that end up being successful at the next level, like Jonathan Taylor for the Colts, Tyrone Wheatley back in the day, where you just give them a little bit of crack and they can accelerate from crack of a seam, give them some daylight, and they're going 0 to 100 like that. And Haynes has that. I mean, that's very special. Marshall Moore, he needs to feel the game and slug it out 2 yards. He's going to fall forward for 3 or 4, and he's going to wear you down. He's more like the big meat tenderizer. He just keeps hammering you. Then eventually, he's going to break one through there. And that's what happened with him. He was tenderizing. Michigan got that turnover with the Cole Sullivan touchdown, or Cole Sullivan interception. Next play, they handed off to Marshall. Touchdown. Yeah, that was a tremendous performance by Marshall. How about a game ball? We're giving game balls out? Marshall, I think, would get one. You give one to Sullivan, give one to Marshall, and then give one to the other Marshall. Marshall brothers. Give one to Zach Marshall. Zach Marshall, Jordan Marshall, and Cole Sullivan. They're my game balls. John. Happy to see Zach Marshall crushing it. John letting us in on some inside information, saying that he spoke to Zach Marshall. Knew he would get his opportunity eventually. I was at one of those summer news conferences where Steve Casula was there. And he's talking about all of his tight ends, and and he's just going down the list. And coaches say, "Oh, Klein's the best inline blocker in the game, and Max Bredesen is the best blocker off the ball in the game." He's going down the list. Marshall moves the most like Colston Loveland of any guy. He's going even to Hoffman, to Hansen, to Priestcorn, and it really did look like they've been really, I think, since Jake Butt, they've been rolling at the tight end position. You go to the Eric All and keep going on. They just get these guys. Barner comes in. It's amazing how these guys, not amazing, but they've been having some success in the NFL. But yeah, I think that sometimes you hear the coaches and they just see the possibilities in there, and once you get to like 5 or 6 deep, like they're saying, oh, everybody's pretty much all of them are great, and you can expect it, but when they got their chance, a lot of what it's all about, being able to capitalize on it. The new life, talking about the secondary, because you did have Hillman out. You did have Rod Moore out. So you needed Mason Curtis. You needed, they had Metcalf, but Mangam. I hope that would be the one. If I could start drawing up, let's start on what you want to see after a win on Saturday. I wouldn't mind seeing Jaden Mangum coming up with an interception. The former Spartan. I wouldn't mind seeing Rashawn Benny, committed to Michigan State, have a big day. On the injury front, Benny seemed, just listening to Sharon Moore, seemed to be okay. Who was the other person that, when he talked about him? You know what? I'm going to have to consult my notes. That's why I take them. There was one other person, when I heard him saying, I was like, that sounds like good news. Benny, a Houseman. Also, Benny's okay. Houseman's okay. Now, Rod Moore, Brandon Hillman, Hansen. Moore said he expects those guys to practice, but your guess is as good as mine on how close they are and if they're going to be out there against Michigan State. I don't know. It's hard to say. A metamorphosis in 7 days. Well, you play away from home and you get tore up. When things start going bad, they can go bad everywhere. I tried emphasizing this last week. They weren't as bad. The players are good. But people wanted to tear down everything. The talent's not there, the depth's not there, recruiting hasn't been there. I mean, they're just like, what? I was thinking, come on. No, but you could be out of position and just have a really bad game, and you can come back and you can play better. So I don't know. It feels like, well, I understand what you're saying. It feels like a metamorphosis, but that's ball. That's what you've got to do. And it does take us back. This has only been a couple years where it's NIL and, now it's a 12 team. It's only the second year where it's a 12-team playoff. So really, previous to last year, we've all mostly been conditioned to, once you lose a game, the season is over. And certainly if you lose 2, that the thing is all gone to hell. You got to start looking for a new coach, and the players are fighting. Everybody's going to transfer. It's just complete misery. Well, it's a little bit more like the NFL now. The Lions have a big game against the Bucs tonight. I think they're going to win that game. But if they don't, it doesn't mean that they're done. And you see it all the time in the NFL. And teams get waxed in the NFL. I remember a couple of years ago in the Lions, so it would have been 2 years ago when they went to Baltimore. They ended up going to the NFC Championship game, but they look like the worst team in the NFL against Baltimore. I mean, Lamar Jackson, they got blown out by 40 points. It didn't mean that all the players on the team were crap. But the metamorphosis, they had a ton of guys that you weren't expecting and that came up big for them. It is new life. Sounds like a nice theme for this week. New life. LJ, do they still burn couches in East Lansing? I would say that I think that is still a thing. I don't know. can you say about E.Lansing night game? Hopefully, we don't see any. It seems like just I don't know about last year or the year before. Yeah, it's a thing. It's kind of like what else is a thing? You know, there's going to be keg stands in E.Lansing. I mean, there's going to be couches. There's going to be keg stands. I mean, it's college. It's E.Lansing. Oh yeah, ride Jordan Marshall. So what if Haynes is back? I mean, what are you? You're riding Jordan Marshall? No, I think you're maybe splitting up that workload a little bit more. But if Haynes is available, he's playing. I mean, he's earned that part, and I don't care. I don't care who it is. I mean, I like Marshall. We don't know. We know that Haynes, what did Sharon said? I mean, he was riding the bike, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't actually think anybody has determined if it was a bruised ribs or if it was something like abdominal. I don't know about that. That would make me think it would be longer, but ribs are, that's not a great thing when you're a running back either. However, whatever it ends up being, sure, you can put some padding there. It hurts like hell. I don't know. However long, if they're playing that, but Moore was, saying that he thought he could have played against USC, could have gone back in there. And then he was last Monday like, oh yeah, we feel good about it or whatever else. So I don't know. So when you ask if we know if Jordan Marshall will be number one, you're asking for, it's not complete speculation because I think that Haynes is close. If I had to guess today, I would say that Haynes is going to play and he's going to start. But you're going to see probably equal reps with he and Marshall. What it does allow you is if you're Michigan and it's, let's say, bruised ribs, and you get an extra week where you feel like he might get close to 100%, where he would be 90, and then maybe you say, let's let Jordan, take it, show us the way one more week. I think there could be that possibility, but I'm thinking that Haynes is going to play. But those are hard things when you speculate. You got to look at them and you got to say a lot of guesswork. Now I know there's people that talk with people that I guess you would say on the staff that, like, I was going to say, like, running their mouth. Sources. Haynes is going to play. Little whispers and stuff like that. Right, Maze Madman? Maze Madman, I think he knows the play. He knows players. Like, they'll tell him. So let's ask Maze Madman straight up. Will Haynes play against Michigan State on Saturday night, Maze Madman? We'll await his response. We'll see. It is a night game. I don't know if you're talking about Michigan State or Purdue, but there you go. Blake Frazier stepping up. That was big. The Marshall plan. Link, what did Sharon say? Not as bad as he thought with Link. But I don't think he's going to be in there Saturday. But the way Frazier has played, heck, it might be a situation where it might be hard for Link to get back in there. Maze Madman says it's going to be, I think he meant a long week. I think so. Linda, Cole Sullivan and Zach Marshall had a nice post-game presser. Those guys showed a lot of class during play, as well as in their post-game presser. Yeah, I was sitting out there in the first row for that press conference, and the happiness from Zach Marshall, who had been around for 3 years. And if I would have been walking around after the game, and Zach Marshall was just in his street clothes and walked up to me and bumped me, I'd have just been like, "Oh, hey, sorry." I would, I didn't know Zach Marshall from Tim Marshall or anybody. Sullivan, I might have, but they, it was like Sullivan's always doing a little bit of something here. So, and we've heard a lot about him, and he's taken his opportunity, and he's starting now, and it enabled him to move. If Cole Sullivan wasn't the playmaker he was, they probably wouldn't have moved Jayshon Barham, but they were like, Sullivan's ready. We can move Barham here. So, yeah, they did have a nice post game. Yes, please hit the like button. I like that. The New Life is talking about Mangham played versus Washington. Yeah, he was out. He may have started. He was out there for, if I made it sounded like that I wanted him to play against Michigan State, like he hadn't been playing. You either heard that wrong or I was saying it wrong, but yeah, he played. I saw him out there. Actually, seeing if they have a starting list here about Mangham started against Oklahoma. Actually, they don't have the starters, but those are all online. There it is. Andres, the team had me down. Lost confidence, but not hope. We are back. Bryce looked fantastic. The zip reads, the O-line protection, great play in base D. Let's go. There you go. Feeling better about things. Now, let's see here when we get down to it. Mays Madman is talking about if Haynes is back, then you have to go with him. So he's just agreeing with me. I wanted a prediction from you. I'm putting your feet to the fire. I mean, you're as close to it as anyone. Randy, let's pitch in for a meat tenderizer. And since Dennis looks experienced, he could present it to Jordan and give him a few tips on how to use it. I don't know if that's a back. It's fine. Let's go. I get the meat tenderizer from, I worked at least a year, maybe 2 years with a Michigan offensive lineman named Rod Payne back in the day. And that's a Payne line. Rod used to say, that's what the Michigan offense, because I used to say, Rod, you guys just run into the line. It's boring to watch. I'd say things like that to him. He said, you got it all wrong. We're coming in there, and what we know is that we're just going to keep leaning on it. We're just going to keep pounding them. And it's like a meat tenderizer, and it's just going to be a matter of time before we take their will. And offensive linemen, they're the kind of guys that you want in an alley, you want in a weight room, because they just want to keep going. Their attitude is that they are smarter, that they are tougher, that it's their team, that everything is running through the offensive line. Forget everything else. That is what wins football games. It starts at the front, and in particular, it starts at the center position. And I don't really have any disagreement with that. You have a great offensive line, you're in business. You want to start with anything? Sure. You want a great quarter? That sounds good to me. Give me a great offensive line. Give me the best offensive line, and you're going to have a pretty good football team. So, yeah, let's get that tenderizer going. I got a meat tenderizer. You're right. I do have. I don't know how many experience I had in actually cooking with pounding any kind of different meat or anything, but I get the idea. I think my mom back in the day used to make some kind of, it wasn't the greatest meat in the world, but she'd pound that and then put some breading on it. Those were pretty good. Round steak? I don't know. I think maybe some chicken too once in a while. Bang that chicken. That's old days. Oh, Triple M says he's not that dialed in. Old Hadley wants to talk about cow tipping. That Moo Yu is well known for that. I don't know. Take some shots at him. Sure. I get all of that, going at Michigan State. And I just know I have not been up there a lot, but so it's been single digits in my life. But I do have to admit this, that every time, and it's been a long time since I've been up there, but I always have a great time. I had a great time the first time I went. And then I had a couple times. I tell these stories. I just like telling them because I have good times. I went RV in 2 years in a row. And 1 year we ended up, this is back in the day. Of course, I'm older now, but I was even older then. I mean, I wasn't college age, but we were up there and we went to one of the bars there, and it was right around Halloween, and everyone was, except us, maybe a couple other people. And there was a guy dressed up as the Pope, and I always thought, well, that's just a great Halloween costume, because you would see the Pope, and everyone wanted to just touch the Pope, and the Pope would just, he was the Pope. It was a great costume. So if you're thinking about that costume idea, a Pope is the great one. And then the greatest, I want to say it's the greatest tailgate I ever went to was RV, parked in the RV row. The weather was spectacular, and it was so good. And my friends, has brothers that were about 10 years younger, and he brought a whole group of ladies to our tailgate. And there were some people, not myself, maybe I should have stayed around. There were some that just stayed around and were like, screw the game. We're staying here at the tailgate. Sometimes, man, you have a tailgate that good that you got to watch it. People are not going to go to the game. I think we'll win with Marshall if Justice isn't ready. Yeah, I think so too. Jordan Marshall isn't chopped liver. Haynes is one of the best backs from what we see with the explosiveness. I mean, that is special quality. You want a lot of things when you're talking about a great running back, great feet, strength, power, shiftiness, all these different things, but explosiveness is a nice thing to have as a running back, and the 0 to 100 is just incredible. But Marshall, that ability to fall forward, and a back that likes the contact and give him a hard hat. You listen to him talk, man, and he's laying it all out there. I know you think, but you give Marshall the ball, you could say, we're giving it to you 30 times, and he's going to say, I am going to give you 100% effort on every single touch that I get. I think they'll win if it's Marshall too. Hadley says after the game this week, he doesn't see Michigan in any more night games. I don't know. People were talking about Purdue as a potential night game. John's thinking that you could see a curb stomping. 49-0. That is about close, Gregory, as a perfect score can be. But I do have to go back, and I learned a lesson, even though I try to have fun, and it is fun and everything else. But Hadley will probably remember. So I was doing a stint back in Ann Arbor during the pandemic, and they, they're going to play the season. Michigan plays against Minnesota, and I was just, with everything that was going on, and I just loved that game. So Michigan won the game. It was a night game. And it was awesome. Michigan got the win against Minnesota. So the next week, it's Michigan State. They're going to play it on Halloween 2020 with everything that's going on. And I just couldn't have hammed it up more. Michigan's going to win this game 50-0, 60-0. Mel Tucker's got no chance. Well, Tucker, how did it go? I'm trying to think. His first game It might have been against Rutgers. And Michigan State was like 1 of 15 on third downs. They turned the ball over like 5 times. I was listening to Tucker, and he's like, I don't know any of the guys on my team. We had to meet everyone through Zoom. They had stickers on their helmets. It was as much about Michigan. But it was just as much about Michigan State and their new head coach, and they didn't know anything what was going on. He couldn't tell hide or hair of his players, and it just, to me, added up to just a complete massacre. Of course, Michigan lost that game, and that was a terrible Halloween. And I said that I'm definitely going to learn my lesson. At least, I am not going to be the 49-0 type prediction guy anymore, even if it looks that way. So, while I get it, Greg, I can't do it. I won't do it. Doug, with an interesting one here, comes in, and he is saying that the glass is half empty and the sky is still falling thanks to the poor coaching, but he's got a big smiley face there. Well, Doug, just say this. It might be the majority of Michigan fans. You might say your glass is half full, but it's half full of Drano if things go south quick. People turn, even the biggest Michigan fans turn. I recall during the national championship game in the second half, you remember going on Twitter and seeing like guys that you would think, wow, that guy's a huge Michigan fan. Completely trash. Sharon Moore should be tarred and feathered if they don't get this going. And Twitter's not the best place for that because you get the the hottest takes during a game. Every play is a meltdown. Some people like that. It's not fun for me, but sometimes it's a little bit entertaining to look at it, especially if you can go after the fact. But yeah, Doug, I would say for the Michigan fans, even the ones that say their glass is half full, it's half full of something, but the sky is falling. It can change like that. I would say it's one of the great things in sports. It's just great in football. Football's so perfect. Or you get a week and, the next day you're watching the pros if you like football. I know not everybody's like that, but I want to watch pro football. And then you get to Monday and everybody's talking about both, or if you're around Ann Arbor, they're talking more about Michigan. If you're in Detroit, they're talking more about the Lions. And then Tuesday, it's vice versa. You get to Wednesday, people are looking ahead, peeking ahead to the games that'll be that weekend. Thursday, you're already, you've got an NFL game. Friday, they'll sprinkle in a college game here or there. Sometimes those are entertaining. And it just plays out so perfectly. Football that way. I don't even know what I was talking about. Start Marshall and work in Haynes, according to Marlins. That would be Marlins' game plan. Doug likes it. Andres doesn't care about my warning signs about my own particular 2020 Halloween. He is picking 42-13. In a new life, 35-17. Is that a cover? 3-18. Yeah. Okay. 37-13. Boy, an old Randy. Sometimes you see a score and, Randy, a 37-13. I might steal that one. I'm thinking kind of the same thing you are. All right. I got 2 other things I forgot. Oh, it was Monday with Moore and May. I went through, if you missed it, I had some of those pictures of Sharon as the construction worker, as the admiral, as the fireman, and as the chef. And I do want to remind everyone that, hey, all of what's going on here today, all of this Michigan talk, it happens all day and all night. It's constant Michigan talk, constant Michigan information. if you've ever sat around thinking, I just want more Michigan. I can't get enough Michigan. Well, then I got news for you. This is it for you. This is it. This is this. I don't know if you know where that's from. It's from the Deer Hunter, Robert De Niro. This is this. I don't remember what he was talking about. Nobody else did either. But that's what the Maize and Blue Review is. It's Michigan. It's all-time Michigan. And I guarantee you'll love it. You like recruiting? Love it. Like Michigan football? That's mainly what it's about. Basketball? Let's go. Pretty easy. Go to on3.com and you'll see the button, Maize and Blue Review. Just subscribe and you're in. Next thing you know, you're on the team. You're talking Michigan all the time, nonstop. I'm going to say it again. I guarantee you'll love it. So, Sharon was in a pretty good mood. You know, he had his coat on, his going to work coat, which people were making fun of him. And he said he was aware, people had told him that there were some memes going around. He said he didn't see them, but, he had, I guess, bigger fish to fry. But his main point was that they won. And I'm going to agree with him. Sharon Moore could have come up there in a bathing suit. And he said that for his team, they needed to swim, sink or swim. And that's why he had his bathing suit on. And, ha, 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 but if they win, I'm like this when it comes to uniforms. Michigan wants to go to a third uniform. I used to be like, oh, that is the ugliest. Oh, terrible. And everybody has their own opinion on uniforms and everything. Oh, it's the ugliest thing of all time. What has happened to me in this thing that's gone on, it's been about 20 years that they've used, they'll do it a lot. If it's a win, I end up liking the uniform. If it's not, I don't like it. That's the way it goes for me when it comes down to it. If Sharon Moore would have lost, I would have thought, yeah, your little going to work coat, throw it away. But, now, hey, go to work like the Pistons. Let's do it. Now, wait a second. The New Life. It's good to see you too, New Life. If we bump into each other, say hello. Say hello. It was 3, 2, 1. Linda Joe is talking about being at the clock game in E.Lansing in 2001 when Michigan lost 24-26. Tough loss. Yeah, I was at that game too. That was the one that I was in the RV for. Yeah. That one I watched, I don't know, at least in the last 5 years, but I hadn't watched it since 2001. So it had been, 20 years or whatever since I had watched it. And I wondered if time, because it's, it was Spartan Bob had his foam finger and he gave Michigan State an extra second. And I remember, Larry Stevens was held. Jim Brandstetter on they're holding Larry, and, it didn't get called. And I watched it, and they really did. They really held Larry. It was such an egregious hold, but you can't do anything about that. And I remember thinking the referee got the ball, sprinted, and, dove in to place the ball for Michigan State to get the timeout. Well, prior to that spot, when you watched a football game, the officials did not move quickly with alacrity. They would just kind of, you could have 5 seconds left of the ball and you watch games prior to that and you'd be like, this game's over. And so there were like 3 seconds and, he kind of moved with a little bit of pace and so they got the timeout, and previous to that, it never looked like they should have. But after the fact, I think what happens, and this is what happens in the evolution of football, you see other teams and other things they do, and it didn't look as egregious all the years later. The hold did, but the spot did not. But at the time, it felt like the worst thing ever. 7 o'clock, Purdue. What do you, I mean? What do you look? I don't mind night games. I can't complain about them. This Saturday, I'm kind of complaining about it, but I don't want to. I don't want to complain too much. I mean, if you go to the games, if you are someone who goes to the games and you want to complain, I think that's all right because it takes a couple hours to get out of there, and if you're somebody that wants to get home at a reasonable time, it's completely understandable. If you're somebody at home, just like I like going to bed at 10:30, because I don't, that's too late. I can't wind down after a Michigan game. It's like okay. I almost guarantee you that there's nobody that's under the age of 30 or 40 who's thinking, well, maybe they got kids, so I can't guarantee all that. All the students, they love the night game. The parties. One of these times I'm just going to have to, relive it. Just get out there and say, okay, if I'm sitting in the press box, I'm going to have gone through a couple tailgates. You're going to have to bear with me. Now I've got a story. I was walking back to my car after the game on Saturday. And there was a point, it was a fork in the road for Michigan. And I was thinking, man, if they would have lost this game, it wouldn't have been a fun week. And, they won it. And so I was, feeling pretty good. Man, I was just walking down this the street that I used to walk down. I hadn't really walked down in a while. It's just the way that the parking situation worked. And, there's still, it's for a noon game. It's, after 5 o'clock when I'm walking back to my car. There's still a few people that are, not as many, but, just a smattering of people. But people that live there with their garages open, they got their tailgates. And, I'm thinking, man, I've always thought that, just give me one day, just give me a Michigan tailgate and I'll just keep coming back. And then I used to always think it didn't matter. People say, I want to be a billionaire. And sure, I wouldn't mind being a billionaire. But if I was a billionaire, I would be at Michigan games, home Saturdays. It didn't matter. That's where I would be. I would be at all those. So it didn't matter how much money you got. And then I'm looking at these houses and I'm like, these guys, this is what it's all about. You'd see they'd have their garage up. They got their TVs in the garage. They got their setup, all this tailgate set up. And I'm just strolling by all these houses thinking, this is the greatest. These guys are all have exactly what I would want. This is a dream. These mansions with Michigan football tailgates all afternoon long. What could be better than that? It was pretty cool. New Life remembers when they tripped Desmond Howard and the no call. That's pretty egregious. Eddie Brown. They did trip him. It was a 1-point loss, and Michigan's throwing the ball to Desmond when he's going to win the Heisman Trophy, and it's pretty bad. That was pretty bad. That was probably the worst New Life. In fact, called that was worse than the hold, because the hold, there's so many other players you can say maybe I don't know, the ref, the linesman. Now he just wasn't in position, or he was looking at somebody else, and he just missed it. This was the last play, and it's just Desmond. But he didn't trip over his own feet. He's tripped. Yeah, let's win this game. Blaine wants to know what happened to Brady Prieskorn. Prieskorn got hurt I think in the warm-ups for it was either the Ohio State game or the bowl game. I forget which. I think Ohio State, maybe? I don't remember. And so he's coming back from that. Where he's at on the depth chart, I don't know. So you're down to 5. I mean, we've seen, if you count Bredesen and Klein and Hansen, Bredesen played, but the other 2 didn't. And then Marshall stepped up, and then Tonelli. And so, yeah, Prieskorn, Jalen Hoffman, he plays here and there, the tight end position. And then there's Prieskorn. So he's coming back from injury. That's what's happening with him. A Samaj thought. Yeah. Hopefully, what was I going to say? Hopefully Samaj just put him in the rearview mirror. Of course, that's what you want to say, all right? The hope for Samaj Morgan is that his drops don't come back to hurt the team ultimately, that the drop isn't on a punt return, that there's, that it doesn't cost him a win, and that staying with him and hanging in there with him, he is a dynamic player with the ball in his hands when he can catch it, is that it will pay off in terms of him making a big play, for this team. But it's an experience. It could easily go the other way. It's a little bit of I feel like you're playing with fire, all of it. That's it. No, they didn't want to call that. That was the thing. The one thing about officials is that, nobody likes to hear, they're on the take. It's a conspiracy. I don't want to say there's something to that, but these guys they're by and large, I was going to say human. They're all human, I think. By and large, sports fans, they are human. They are sitting around talking about a lot of things. I would think that they would want to be above the fray on, let's, get these guys, or that was just talking with somebody today that was telling me that, oh yeah, they think that he thinks, and the people that he talked with, they think that the referees, not that they, of course they're not putting out an email, but when they're talking around, even if they're not talking with themselves, is that there is a little bit of backlash against Michigan because of Stallions and Harbaugh, and whether they want to say it, or whether it's in the back of their mind, or whether it's not in the back of their mind, it's just subconscious, like, this team, deserves a little, short end of the stick or something. I don't know. They're not getting, I've always been someone that says it's going to even out in a game. And if it doesn't even out in a game, it's certainly going to even out over the course of the season. If it doesn't even out in the course of the season, it's going to eventually. But, that, I don't know. I don't even like saying that anymore, because right now, I don't know. I don't like to live too much into the conspiratorial realm. What I have found that when you do that, if it makes you happy, do it. If you feel like, oh, these dirty son of a bitch, and if it makes you feel good, then do it. That's good. My dad always thought that. My dad was a big gambler. So he thought the refs, I got the wrong side. This ref's going to, all game long. I mean, he had his excuse already for the first quarter, first play. Oh, I got the wrong side. Obviously, this ref. And, Jerry, if I wouldn't have bet this game, if I knew Jerry Markwright was going to be, okay. I don't know if that made him happy, or if it just made him felt like, it made him, or at least he had an excuse. Like, I don't know why I bet, the Dallas Cowboys, not with Markwright, that was a stupid thing. My point is that if it makes you feel good when it comes to sports, go ahead and do it. If you feel like everybody's against Michigan, say it. Could it be? And I'm telling you that it could be. There's enough of this conversation. They're sports fans. These guys are sitting around listening to sports talk radio. Get Michigan, get Michigan. Oh, maybe they are getting them. somebody was saying, oh, the Michigan won't get a call next year either. I mean, this is going to next year. I mean, how long is this? How long is this referee backlash for the conspiracy? And maybe it's true. Is it going to be in the back of their mind? Do they have to suffer enough? There's a lot of power from these officials. I don't know. I doubt that they're sitting around in the pregame like, just let it slide. Now, maybe if they're gambling, I'm just talking about officials being against Michigan. They're not gambling. They just subconsciously don't want to give Michigan calls because they thought they didn't deserve to win the national championship. I think that's what people are saying, right? That's what you're saying. If you think that the refs are in on it, you're saying that that's why they're not giving them the calls because they didn't, just because of Stallions. Now, that's a tough place to live, but also when you watch the game, you don't have to get upset about it, or you can say, oh yeah, that's the reason. At least it's talked about, so it doesn't make me feel good talking about it, so I don't sit around talking about it all the time. Yeah, it's going to be 3 years. Don't talk about it. Thanks. Catch everything against Ohio State. Maybe get a couple calls against Michigan State. LJM's favorite ref was Ed Hockley. Yeah, Ed Hockley was like the first guy you looked like that. Like, he really lifted weights. You're like, look, Ed. Doesn't Ed Hockley, like his kid is in there now, and he's got a gun show going on too. That's it. David thinks these refs just aren't very good. Well, I think there's a part of that too. They are human again. You get back to that, so they're gonna miss a lot of calls, or they're going to miss calls, and I don't know what the pay is like, but no, they have. You can tell them you shouldn't have a vendetta. Everything you should do should be on the up and up. Whatever you're getting paid, you should be happy about it. All of these games that are going on, there's a lot of officials when you start thinking about it. And what we are asking them, hey, you be 100% completely objective, work at your craft, putting yourself in the position. Don't worry about what anybody on any sports talk or any writer or any fan has to say, especially the ones that are going to be in the stadium telling you you're the biggest jackass ever. You rise all above that, focus on your job, work at it, and then you still, could end up missing some calls and everything else. So basketball ones are that. I think they're the ones that are the worst because it's like for year after year, they become part of the story. And it's like they're bigger than the game. Some of these guys act like they're bigger than the game. Like, oh no, this is what we're dealing with. And, they think that that the attention gets to them. The popularity gets to them. Oh, I'm, Ted Valentine. How dare you talk to me? I'm gonna affect this game. I don't want to know your name. I don't want to know any officials' names. Tough job. Very tough. That's right. Look, we just went through with what went through the Lions and all this, so the whole scripting and the NFL wants Kansas City this week and today wouldn't be a very good saying. Oh, okay, everything. No, none of that's happening. No, Mahomes is favored. Gets favorable treatment. The Kansas City Chiefs get preferential calls. Do I actually think that it's Roger Goodell, with some kind of edict? No, I think that a lot of they know who the best players are and who the team is, and in the back of their mind, they're working with that. However, I don't know why they would have lied, and they got caught with their pants down on that Lions and the Goff play. So once you get that, you say, well, what do you say about that? Well, what do you say about that is that it looked really bad for the league. That's what I say. I think they're in on a lot of those. There's a hold. Get together and pick that one up. So we don't know unless we have a feed of what's going on in those officials whenever they say, oh, no, that's heightened replay. What do they call that? Expedited replay. Expedited replay helped us out. They get together and somebody's able to look at, and they're up there looking at it and say, just tell them that we've got a 100% clear look at that. And there was a face mask on the play. So you better, they're doing it. So it's not on, we can't handle the truth that way either. Let's get those mics. Let's get a feed. And let's hear what New York is saying to the officials. That's what I want. That's what I would like to see. Yes, or I could have just said, I want full transparency instead of doing all the things that I just said. Refs. Mr. Martini's talking about 2 holds. I know that Barham gets held a lot. I noticed that when I'm watching. I noticed some of it. But the one part when you're a Michigan fan, there's nothing against Michigan fans. I love them. They're my favorite. Or even Michigan media, who are mostly fans, they just zoom in on Michigan. And if there's another call and like, oh, they don't remember that one. It's and so they just focus in. I still think there might be. Is there a subconscious backlash by the officials towards Michigan this year and then potentially next year? I mean, if it's subconscious, how do you know if it's going to be gone or not? And nothing you can do about it. You can either tear your hair out or you could just, maybe be like a wrestling fans don't care. Everything's scripted and it plays out like that. And there's favoritism and everything else. And they still seem to all have a ball. I love it. Maybe just be like that. Maybe just be like, hey, this is hopefully Tony Bettini is, thinking Michigan would look good against Ohio State undefeated. Or winning the rest of their games going into that. Maybe Bettini is, somehow getting that information to his officials, no matter. And so subconsciously they're backlashing, and now they're getting the news like, no, they want Michigan there. I would think that Bettini and the networks would all want Michigan to win the rest of their games. What justification could they possibly come up with money-wise where they would want Michigan to lose to Michigan State? Or Purdue? Or Northwestern? They don't. Or Maryland? Absolutely not. Michigan's got the refs for the next 4 games. Yeah, it's not an easy job. Inconsistency, incompetence. We could sit here for another couple hours. That's going to do it. We'll see you over on the Maize and Blue review. Join up. We'd love to see you over there. Now, we'll talk with you on Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.